This is a Sandy Boy Productions podcast.
Welcome to the Urban Pharmacy Podcast, where we help women remove the overwhelm of living their most holistic life. This is the place to find evidence-based nutrition tactics, healthy lifestyle and wellness tips, abundance mindset, and easily implementable low-tox living strategies so you can rise up to your full potential and protect your family's health. I'm your host, Stacey Heine, certified holistic nutritionist and better living advocate. Now, let's get empowered with some simple swaps that make a big impact for optimal wellness. Welcome to episode 13 of the Urban Pharmacy Podcast. I am so excited for you to hear today's guest. It is Dr. Yami, who is a board-certified pediatrician, certified lifestyle medicine physician, national board-certified health and wellness coach, author, and professional speaker. She is passionate about promoting a healthy lifestyle, especially the power of plant-based diets for prevention of chronic illness. She found VeggieFitKids.com, where she provides information on plant-based diets for children and hosts the podcast called Veggie Doctor Radio. She obtained a certificate in plant-based nutrition in 2013 and is a certified Food for Life instructor, just like I am, through the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. She's also a Jack Canfield Success Principles certified trainer. She is a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics and a diplomate of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Dr. Yami owns Nourish Wellness, a pediatric micro practice in Yakima, Washington, where she lives with her husband and two active sons. Her book is called A Parent's Guide to Intuitive Eating: How to Raise Kids Who Love to Eat Healthy. You can find out more about Dr. Yami at dryami.com. And in today's episode, we cover a lot, but let me give you just a few of the things I know you'll be interested in hearing. And that is a question and questions that I get asked all the time. Are kids on a vegan diet going to get enough protein? What do I do about my picky eaters? How to encourage kids to transition from meat to a more plant-predominant or plant-based eating pattern, and so many more questions that I had her cover when it comes to kiddos and nutrition. And I really love how Dr. Yami explains that we're like stressing out too much about it, basically. I mean, of course, nutrition needs to be met, but she just has such a great way to bring a parent's mind to ease. So I know you're going to love this episode. Without further ado, here is Dr. Yami. Hello, Dr. Yami, and welcome. I am so excited to have you here today. Let's just dive right in. I have a question. I would love to know more about your book that you released in 2019 about intuitive eating and children.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Super fun to be here. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking about this. So thanks for asking about my book. I released my book in 2019. It's called A Parent's Guide to Intuitive Eating: How to Raise Kids Who Love to Eat Healthy. And the reason I wrote this book is because I think a lot of parents know mostly what to feed their kids. They know that they want to feed their kids healthy food. They know they want to have healthy lifestyles, but they don't know how to do it. And especially sometimes when we get really into categorizing foods as healthy or unhealthy, sometimes we get lost in those details, and it can create some restriction and some rules that actually end up being counterproductive to our goals as parents. And as a pediatrician, I also have found that parents find feeding kids really stressful. They're not having fun. There's a lot of mealtime battles. It's very frustrating. And really, I think that eating and feeding our kids should be easy, fun, and pleasurable. And that's why I wrote this book, because I wanted to support parents in how to feed their kids, but also what to feed their kids so that we can have less stress and more joy.
I love that. And that kind of brings me to something that I do talk about kind of often, and how, maybe you touch on this in your book, but we tend to major in minor things and get really stuck on, little details when instead of looking at like the big picture when it comes to feeding our kids, and really stressing about like certain nutrients, which we might be talking about today. And I can't wait to hear what you think about those specific nutrients. All right. So what do you suggest when it comes to picky eaters? This is something that I get a question about a lot. And I have a 3.5-year-old. And so I'm not there yet. He's kind of picky, but what do you suggest for parents who are dealing with this?
Yeah, the reason you hear this question so much is because the majority of parents of children between the ages of 1 through 5 will describe their child as picky. So that's everybody.
Okay.
So basically what that means is that it's probably part of normal development, but we perseverate on it, and we keep calling our kids picky, and we call our kids picky in front of other people. And then this vicious cycle continues. So there's really no need to label it that way. There is such a thing as extreme picky eating. It's a lot less common. It's more rare, but there is such a thing as being so selective that it's a medical problem. But the majority of the time when parents are describing their kids as picky, it's just part of their normal development and the way that they grow and change over time. So what I tell parents, what you started before as far as micromanaging these nutrients, I think that's part of the issue that parents get really anxious about. But what I tell parents is that the best way to help a child learn to like a food is by consistent and repeated exposure. You cannot learn to like a food unless you're exposed to a food. It's not just like this magical thing that one day after never having seen broccoli, your kid becomes a broccoli lover. You have to expose them. The first few times they may not even look at it. They may not touch it. One day they might touch it. One day maybe they'll put it in their mouth and spit it out. So you have to continue to expose them to that food. But I think what's really critical going along with this is that parents, I want them to take a step back, take a deep breath, and relax, because there are so many parents that are so worried that their child is malnourished, not getting enough nutrients, and something horrible is going to happen. When I interview parents about this, they can't even specifically verbalize what they're worried about. They just know something bad could happen if their child doesn't get enough protein or calcium or iron or whatever. Something really bad's going to happen. This anxiety causes parents to start to micromanage. You need to finish that. You need to eat more of that. You can't have this until you have that. And then we start interfering with our child's natural intuitive capacities to determine when they're hungry, when they're satisfied, when to start eating, when to stop eating. So I think that those two issues can really interfere with how we're feeding our children.
Got it. Good explanation. Thank you so much. So you touched a little bit on protein. Can we go there? Let's go there, because that's another one that I get asked so often. And I would love to know your high-level scientific explanation for those who are concerned about their children that are plant-based getting enough protein. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's going to take me 2 seconds. Don't worry about it. Literally, this is not a problem, okay? I don't know at what point parents started getting really worried about this. I think it goes back to a time when there was true food scarcity and we didn't have enough calories. And foods that are what we think of as high sources of protein also tend to be calorie dense. So that's going to be the foods that we've traditionally given to children to try to, quote, fatten them up. Milk and meats and things like that. Those foods are not only protein. The only thing that's only protein is protein powder. And even protein powders usually have other things in it. But there is no food that's only protein in the natural world. Okay. So these foods, usually the animal products, they have protein, they have fat, a lot of saturated fat, and so they're calorie dense. And so probably there was a time in our history where we knew that eating those foods might contribute more calories, and calories are essential for growth and development. But when I talk to parents raising plant-based kids, as long as they're eating a reasonable variety of foods, like if they're only having apple juice, that's not going to be enough protein, right? But that's also going to be really difficult to get enough calories. So if you're eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds in a reasonable variety, and you're getting sufficient calories, you are getting plenty protein, probably more than the recommended baseline for protein. So this is, as a pediatrician, as a physician, it is not something that I am concerned about when it comes to a typically developing child that doesn't have a chronic condition, such as like some sort of kidney condition where they pee out their protein or something like that. So it's just not a concern. I think we need to stop worrying about it.
Amen. I could not agree more. And the good news is that every plant has protein, and a lot of people just don't know that. It's where the largest mammals on Earth get their protein, and it's packaged beautifully with phytonutrients and fiber, which we all need more of.
Exactly. So, I think that's a very, very, very important point that most people don't know, because we grew up in this country learning about foods as like one macronutrient. But like I said, most foods, especially whole foods, there's no whole food that's just one macronutrient. They're a combination. But the thing that animal products lack that only plants have is fiber. Animal products do not have any fiber, and they're usually either zero or very low when it comes to antioxidants. And so why not pick a package that's more beneficial to us? The sources of protein in the plant world that also have fiber, that also have antioxidants, that are delicious and satisfying and filling, it's going to be overall better for us. So just think of all whole foods as having protein in them. That's just part of the way that life works. Like, molecules, like all whole foods have protein in them. There's different percentages as far as concentration of protein. But if you're eating a reasonable variety of these whole foods, then do not be concerned.
100%. They are packaged in a beautiful little gift coming in whole plant form. Okay, so I'm going to shift a little bit. We're still on the topic of eating for what we would say is a picky eater, but you've kind of debunked that. We need to kind of go back to, we need to read your book, really, is what we need to do. But filling your children up if they don't like combination foods. This is something that I don't want to say that I'm struggling with, because I'm trying not to make it a battle. However, I do find, and I find my toddler, and I know that other children just don't like the mixture, just don't like foods being mixed together. And I think that's totally normal. But do you think that this is normal? Do you have any ways to overcome that? And I have somebody concerned about helping their children be filled up, because they don't like the combination of foods and they only like to have like one or two or three things mainly.
Well, I think this is very typical. And what I teach families is when you have little kids, babies that are just starting complementary foods, and toddlers, it's okay to keep it super, super simple. And when you have toddlers, they can get easily overwhelmed when they are presented with too many options at once. So sometimes just 2 options at a time. They can have their steamed broccoli and their, whole wheat toast or whatever. You have those 2 things on their high chair. When they have finished that, you can put a different thing on there, so that they're not overwhelmed with like too much. However, like I said before, we don't want to just cater to what our kids are eating or what they're trying. That's not our job as parents. I like to teach parents, Ellen Satter's division of responsibilities, which means that a parent decides what, when, and where a child is to eat. And then it's the child's autonomy to decide if and how much. Okay. So if you're cooking for the family and you make a chili and it's got more than one kind of bean in it, it's okay to put that on your child's tray in addition to their toast or whatever it is that's a food that you know that they typically like at a time. But then it's really important that you step back and not interfere. So if they're not eating or touching the chili, you're not going to try to cajole or encourage or bribe or any of that. You just keep exposing. And the next night when you have quinoa with garbanzos, same thing. You're going to expose. And the next night, next night. And yeah, sometimes toddlers go through days, weeks, maybe even months where they will continue to not try that food, but you have to stay persistent. You have to continue to expose, and they eventually will. They'll eventually eat that. And then just make it like it's normal. You don't get emotional about it. It just is what it is. You know, you put it there, go on, move on. And then when mealtime is over, it's over. So I think it's really important to not get really hung up on all the details and not get offended by it. Don't get emotional by it. Don't get your feelings hurt by it. And also don't think about it too much. Like, don't say like, if they like, you know, I think sometimes what moms do especially is our child does one thing and then we project 20 years into the future and we think, oh my God, they're never gonna eat this ever, you know? And so then it's like this panic and then it changes the way we feed them. We get anxious. We're like, you gotta eat it, you know? So it really is about not being attached to the outcome. You know, you just keep doing your thing. You of course have a flexible structure, but I think it's really important. The most important key point is to continue to expose your child to these foods if you want them to at some point try them and eat them.
Yeah, I love that. That brings me back to my childhood when I was given canned spinach with probably more salt on top of the canned salty spinach with butter on it. But my mom put it on my plate over and over again. I eventually loved it. And then I eventually weaned myself off of the canned spinach, you know, and now I love the fresh spinach. So I'm actually thankful for that repeat exposure, even though I hated it at first. It's very good that I was, you know, exposed to it over and over again. And it got me to eat it. So I'm thankful for that. I think that's definitely key. Okay. So bringing it to the kiddos who are going to school. There's no control over what they eat at school if they are getting lunches at school. Do you have suggestions for that around that area?
Yeah, this is a great question. I address this in my book as well. There's no right or wrong. Basically, as a family, you have to decide what's right for you. And there's so many considerations, right? Like some families qualify for free lunch and that's really helpful for them financially. If you want to do the lunch and you are hoping that there's more health promoting things, you can definitely reach out to the administration, see where you can get on that. In my experience, that can be pretty tough because they follow very strict guidelines. So schools have it really tough because they have these guidelines, but at the same time, they also have financial constraints. And so they're trying to reach the guidelines in a way that makes financial sense for them, which is why things like juice count as fruit and things like that, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. So if you're a family that you absolutely just have to do school lunch, then see how you can work with the school, have options, especially like if your child has issues with dairy or something like that, you can talk to your doctor and your doctor can write a note. That's like one of my favorite things to do is write notes for families so that their child will be given alternatives in daycare, preschool, and school, because that is a right that you have. So you can do stuff like that. Another choice is you can always pack your child's lunch. Now, some people may not be able to do this also because of time, but there's ways that you can cut down on time. And once your children are old enough, they can pack their own lunch. Like my kids are 11 and 16. I do not pack their lunches ever anymore. That is something that I have delegated to them because I'm busy and I have other things to do. But I also want them to learn to take charge of their own, well-being and their food. And so they're learning how to do that as well. And then you can also do a combo. So I've had families that, you usually get the menu ahead of time. So you know what's going to be in the lunch. You can look through the menu together, decide which days are more friendly to your way of eating, and just have the child do school lunch on those days. And it also depends on the personality of your child. My children have never minded. My children have always taken lunch themselves. They are not sensitive to, they don't care if, their lunch looks different from other kids. They've never, ever been teased for their lunches. In fact, my children have probably prompted other children to try to eat vegan. It's really interesting. So I think it depends on the personality of the child, because I've definitely heard some families say that their children got teased or their child never wants to take their lunch. So all of those factors matter. So you have to decide as a family what's right for you, but also know that it's dynamic. It changes over time. So first through third grade, you might always send your child with a lunch. But then as they get older, they're like, I really want to try school lunch. How can we make that work? Maybe they just take a few items and also have school lunch. You feel like they're old enough that they can make choices that are good for their bodies, or you let it go completely. Sometimes some families, they're going to eat plant-based at home, keep it super healthy, but then outside of the home, they let the child make the choices. So there's no right or wrong. You just have to sit down and take all the considerations, evaluate them all, and then decide what's going to be right for you and try it out, see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. I know with you being affiliated with the Physicians Committee, I also am as well. You and I are both Food for Life instructors. And, it's part of a lot of what we're trying to do to get school lunches to be more healthful. And like you said, it's hard. It's very hard to shift this industry to a safer place for our children who are growing up. But, we vote with our dollars. So the more that we can support the industries that are keeping chronic illness at bay, the better. And I like how you have that approach to, keeping it plant-based at home. And if they need to eat the school lunch, then it's okay. And to take it day by day and just to do the best that we can for our kids. So thank you for that.
And school lunches are getting better. I know that you might look at them and you're like, oh my God, this is awful. Yeah. But I've been a pediatrician for almost 12 years, and I can tell you it has gotten better. Yeah. It might be hard to tell, but we are making some improvements over time. And I really do think that schools are trying their best. They just have so many things they need to do with such a limited budget and resources and staff and everything. Mm-hmm. So just whenever you approach the administration, do it from a place of love and compassion instead of coming at it so aggressively and angry. Mm-hmm. And I only say this because I learn everything the hard way, okay? Like, I've made these mistakes when I come like, how dare you feed this to kids, Yeah. But we just need to approach them with empathy and love and know that they're trying to do so much for our children and they really care. And then I feel like we will make improvements over time. It just does take time and it takes effort, but we'll get there eventually.
Yes, we will. We will. Hey friend, before we get too far into this episode, I want to be sure you know about how the environment plays a role on your overall health. For over a decade, I've been learning so much about the lack of health regulation in the personal care and food industries, and that's actually one of the reasons why I started this show. You deserve to know how to protect you and your family from unwanted body burden, and I share further information about how to make better choices and vote with your dollar in our private Facebook community called The Urban Pharmacy. On that note, I want to let you know about one of the easiest ways that we've switched to safer, and that's through my favorite clean beauty brand called Beauty Counter. Your skin is your largest organ, and what you put on it every day matters a lot. And with a low carbon footprint, cruelty-free formulations, and high-performing results, I haven't found a better beauty brand than Beauty Counter in over 5 years of working with this mission-driven brand. To learn more and shop clean, head to mybetterbeauty.com. All right, so plant-based kids and iron. Can you touch on that?
Yes. So it is a myth that vegans or plant-based eaters have a higher risk of iron deficiency than the rest of the population. It's not true. In fact, I think that sometimes plant-based eaters tend to have an advantage, especially for children that aren't over-consuming a bunch of cow's milk, because a lot of people don't realize that cow's milk actually, there's many different mechanisms by which this happens, but it competes for the absorption of iron. So children that are over consuming dairy and cow's milk might actually become iron deficient because of that. So whenever our children are not consuming those things, it helps. Iron deficiency, though, is the number one nutrient deficiency in the world. So it's actually pretty common. And there are some people that have it despite doing everything perfect in their diet. So there's probably genetic reasons why some people absorb less iron. There's probably lots of different reasons for that. But I would say be conscious of iron intake. Whenever your child is small, you can use iron fortified foods like iron fortified cereals, things like that. But I try to get my babies on lentils and legumes as soon as possible at 6 months and have it be part of their regular diet. I'm trying to create bean lovers, bean fanatics in my patients. And I would love it if everybody ate beans at least once a day, if not more. But lentils, split peas, black beans, all such great sources of iron, but also our leafy greens too. And whenever we consume those with a good source of vitamin C, which most plants do have good vitamin C in them, then we improve the absorption of the iron as well. So it's not something that I'm concerned about as far as plant-based kids being higher risk of iron deficiency, but as a pediatrician, it is something that I think about because everybody is at higher risk of iron deficiency in our world. So it is something we need to be mindful about.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go back to another nutrient here in a minute, but speaking of beans, what do you do for somebody who has a child who is allergic to legumes, but wants them to be plant-based and is concerned about them getting enough protein?
Yeah, this is a great question, and this is a tough problem. I actually had this email this week, and I actually have a friend, one of my good friends, who her kids are allergic to legumes and several nuts, and it really creates a conundrum. My recommendation is this. First of all, it's very rare. There's not very many people that are allergic to beans. And, fortunately, there's 400 different kinds of beans. Most people aren't allergic to all beans, but once you're allergic to one bean, you may be allergic to more beans. So that's something you need to work with your allergist on. But for these children, these people, working with a plant-based dietitian is a great idea. Okay. I'm not really concerned about protein per se, but depending on the age of the child, getting sufficient calories may be tough. Because if you're not getting beans, and perhaps you might even be allergic to nuts, because a lot of kids that are allergic to beans are also allergic to nuts, tree nuts. And so then you just don't have as much calorie density. That leaves you with whole grains, which are great, vegetables and fruits. But for little kids, just eating fruits and vegetables, they have to eat a lot more volume of those foods, and their tummies are small, and they don't have time to be sitting and eating all day. They don't want to do that. They want to play. So there's likely creative ways that you can get around it, but I recommend working with a good, experienced, knowledgeable, plant-based dietitian who can help you with these things. And what I love about dietitians is what I don't do. I don't like to micromanage and get down and look at numbers and calculate things, but that's what they love to do. So they can do that. Yeah. Glad that they exist because of that. But like I said, these cases are rare. Most people are not going to be, faced with this conundrum, but for those that are, they're going to need extra help.
And we have a resource for the plantbaseddocs.com for people who are looking for providers, maybe in their area or virtually. And all right, so going back to a nutrient of concern that I've heard, choline. Can you explain the difference between choline in plants and choline from animal sources?
Well, I'm definitely not an expert on this as far as what the differences are. But one thing that I do know about choline from animal sources, and eggs being one of the sources that people often talk about, is that there could be some disadvantages to our gut bacteria. So one of the things that's a huge advantage to eating plant-based food is that we are feeding our good gut bacteria, which are doing so much for us, cardiovascular, our brain health, all of that. But whenever we are consuming animal products, the choline can actually feed disadvantageous, the not beneficial gut bacteria. And this can create feedback for a cardiovascular system that's not great. So, I think that we're going to be hearing more about choline. And there are some people that say, oh, maybe kids should have a little bit of egg or this or that. But at this point, it's not something that I'm concerned about, especially, like I said, if children are eating a good variety of whole plant foods, getting their beans for those. The majority of us that are not allergic to beans, getting those legumes in there and their nuts and seeds. I'm not super concerned about it.
Got it. Thank you. And all right, how do you suggest children expand their palate? Again, just from the handful of fruits and veggies that they're eating, is it just that repeat exposure?
Well, definitely that's the primary thing. You have to expose them. But what are the ways that we expose children? That's unlimited, right? Cooking with them, helping them flip through books and choose menus, choose recipes they want to do, growing a garden together. One of the things I love talking about is serving food bar style. I don't know if you've heard of this, like having a potato bar or a taco bar, a salad bar, make your own pizza bar. So you have all of these beautiful ingredients. Then each member of the family gets to have autonomy and choice when they're picking the toppings of their food item. And that's another way. So there's lots of different ways, but I think the more you can get your child involved and the earlier you get them involved. And if you make this just normal, like we eat a variety of foods and that's normal for us, that's really important. And of course, role modeling. A lot of parents, which is really great, want their kids to be healthy and eat healthy food, but they themselves don't. And that's the reason why they just want to start changing the direction of their family and the trajectory, but they haven't yet adopted the habits. So it's important for parents to start adopting those habits. And yes, it might take you some time, but start eating a greater variety of vegetables and fruits. Try different beans, try different whole grains, and you're going to be role modeling this for your child. Believe me, you think they're not watching, they are. It's super important to role model.
I love that. Yeah, we get like boxes of Miami fruit delivered to us with like really, like exotic different fruits. I'm trying to do my best at exposing our son to really wildly looking different foods. I think that, everybody, no matter where you live, there is some different types of fruits and stuff like that you can pick up at the grocery store that might make eating more fun. And I love the fact that you touched on gardening and getting in touch with your food. That's something that we do. And as a family, we sell our produce at the farmers markets. And I'm trying to suggest and have created a program to help people learn a little bit about getting more in touch with their food. Because I actually did a camp for my externship, and children honestly thought that their milk came from corn. Like they were so disconnected to where food comes from. So I think if you can grow an herb in your windowsill, or if you can let your kid pick a pepper off the plant, like it's going to really help them make that connection. And I love the idea of a potato bar or, like nachos. That's a really great and fun idea to get them in the kitchen with you too. So speaking of kids that you said, the younger, the better. As we expose them to these different foods, what would you suggest for an 11 or 12-year-old who refuses to try anything new, and that their parents might feel like it isn't fair to uproot their eating habits from what they've been brought up with, but they want their children to eat more plant-based?
Yeah, I think parents worry too much about this. I don't think it's also the mindset, right? You don't have to see it as uprooting anything. And remember, you're the parent. So I'm giving you permission to be a parent. Yeah. And if you have evaluated your eating habits and you realize that you're not on the path you want to be inside your family, in your household, you can start making changes. You have full autonomy to do that. Your child is not an adult. Okay. So it's fine. Yeah. Now, do you have to go from chicken nuggets and grilled cheese to just quinoa and steamed broccoli? No, you don't. You can make slow changes in that direction, and you don't have to ask permission. It's okay if you talk to your family about it, but you can make the choice on your own. It's totally fine. Yeah. Sorry, I'm like really on this point because I just want parents to feel empowered to do this.
Yes. Yeah.
So say your child they're used to only eating chicken nuggets. I always say chicken nuggets because that's like the most common. Okay.
Well, this is one of the questions that I had. How do you wean children off of chicken nuggets? Literally.
Chicken nuggets. I'm serious. Like this is the American childhood food. Okay. So say they're only eating chicken. So you can continue to do some chicken nuggets a few times a week, maybe cut down on the amount, maybe mix it with, you can even just start with some plant-based, quote, chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
And slowly start to transition at the same time as you bring in other health promoting foods. How about we make a Mediterranean lentil stew? You don't say vegan, don't say plant-based, don't say any of that stuff. Just talk about how you're going to experiment more in the kitchen. But remember that important piece that I told you before, which is when you present it, and then you got to let go after that. So you can't get mad or your feelings hurt or force the kid, because then they feel intimidated, they feel forced, they feel obligated, and then it creates this tension. And studies show that when we force our kids to eat foods or certain foods specifically, they are going to actually eat a lower variety. Their variety of fruits and vegetables decreases when we force them. So you have the full autonomy to do these things. You don't have to do it so dramatic. You can do it over time, slowly, but just start to play, start to experiment, and put more health promoting foods in the food that you cook and the recipes you make as much as possible. I really would love parents to include a fruit, vegetable, whole grain, legume, or nuts and seeds into every meal, every snack. It doesn't have to be only plant-based. But how can you just think of creative ways? How can I add these foods to every eating opportunity? And then you just progress from there.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, I have a young one, so I don't really have great suggestions. How do you feel, Dr. Yami, about replacing the chicken nugget with, like you said, like a vegan option? How do you feel about making the swap from a regular burger to an Impossible Burger, or a real chicken nugget to a processed chicken nugget? We know that these replacements are highly processed. How do you feel about that? Or do you think that just exposing them to different things like the Mediterranean stew is a better way to go?
I think that there's no right or wrong like before. Okay. I really want parents to just navigate the path that works for them. But I think it's totally acceptable to stair-step things, because different children at different stages of development, like you had mentioned before, there are some children that literally they've been eating chicken nuggets most nights of the week for years. Like there are children like this that exist. It's true. That's how they've been eating. So it's totally fine to replace it with a plant-based chicken nugget and then progress from there. Especially if you find one that they actually like. I mean, to me, that has lots of advantages. Whether we're talking about a little bit more fiber, less of saturated fat, of course, environmental, ethical. It has so many advantages. So even making that one switch can have a lot of advantages. But then find creative ways to keep progressing. So then after that, how about you learn to make your own chickpea nuggets, and then you put some broccoli in there, some whatever, so you can stair step down. Or if you want to continue to just serve a few chicken nuggets a few times a week, but also introduce your other plant-based foods, your whole foods that you're cooking at home, that's fine too. So you just have to find what works for you, but I just want you to feel empowered to do it. It's okay to do it, and you are the boss. So just do it if you want to do it.
Right. I love it. Okay, so getting down to the little bitties, when do you suggest that parents start feeding their children solids?
All right. So in my practice, I recommend starting complementary foods between 4 and 6 months of age. Most kids are not going to be ready right at 4 months. And a lot of exclusively breastfeeding moms want to wait closer to 6 months, which is fine. However, there's evidence to show that we have this narrow window of opportunity between 5 and 7 months where babies are particularly receptive to bitter and strong flavors.
Okay.
So I really would love it if we kind of changed how we introduce complementary foods to babies. And when they're ready, sitting up, supported, keep their head up, they seem interested in food, which most families know because the baby's like literally drooling, looking at you and like licking their lips, reaching out for food, trying to grab it from you. You know that they're probably ready. They're ready to start eating. And so I want them to start those green leafy veggies right away. So kale, spinach, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, well-cooked, pureed. I'm a fan of baby-led weaning. I think it's great. However, we have this narrow window of opportunity between 5 and 7 months, and not all babies that are ready to eat are ready to just fully feed themselves yet at that point. So I think it's completely fine to do purees until you see that your baby's like, I don't want that spoon anymore. Let me feed myself. And then you can transition to baby-led weaning.
Love that.
Either way, you don't want to wait past 6 months because our research shows that when we wait past 6 months, it also increases the risk of developing food allergies. If you start before 4 months, the same. So between 4 and 6 months, if you want to wait like all the way up to the 6 month edge when your baby's ready, that's fine. But let's not do this whole rice cereal thing first. I also recommend, don't try to do the fruits and avocado first because everybody likes it. I mean, everybody likes avocado. I mean, it's so easy to like. So let's start with the foods that are a little bit harder to like and see what that does for their future, because these kids that we start these foods on in the future, they're more likely to gravitate towards those foods.
I love that. And I love to know that we have that window of time to really help them in their flavor, receptors later in life. That's great to know. So just a little bit kind of on the baby-led weaning and getting them into eating solid foods. Are there any particular foods, aside from like, of course, grapes that you need to cut or raw honey, are there specific foods that you say to steer clear from when a child is starting these complementary foods, whether they're pureed or baby-led?
Yeah. So definitely choking hazards and honey, like you said, we have to be really careful about. And I will say that probably the allergists disagree with me, and they have on my podcast. I have 2 episodes with allergists that were released in 2020, which are really good. So if you have allergy questions, definitely check those out. But I just really am not a fan of dairy. And I just feel like a lot of kids develop adverse effects of dairy, especially when it started very young. So I would really prefer my babies not to be exposed to it. However, for those that have allergy concerns, there may be some advantage of exposing them to it to decrease their risk of developing a dairy or milk anaphylaxis, which is totally something that we want to think about. So each family has to weigh that. And if they are going to expose them to dairy, just know that when it comes to any of these allergenic foods, it doesn't have to be a lot. It's just very small amounts, 2 to 3 times a week. You just have to be consistent about it. So I would say that that's the big one for me. And, but whatever, even if your family decides that they're going to do animal products for little babies, I always steer them towards doing the majority of these foods with whole plant foods, because those are the health promoting foods. Those are the foods that are giving our babies antioxidants and phytonutrients and all of this. So let's make that the majority of what we expose them to.
I love that. Okay. And going back to just one more thing, Dr. Yami, I know you went to Ruby and you love cooking and you love all the flavors. So here's one from a friend. What would a meal look like that you would feed your children if your children don't like pasta?
I mean, there's so much, but that's rare because most kids love pasta.
I know. Yeah.
But last night, I don't know, my kids, like they're older now, they're 11 and 16 and they're just used to me exposing them to all of these foods. But But, one of the things that we love is taco nights, and you can make that anything you want. So you can make lentil tacos, you can make chickpea tacos, you can make black bean tacos. Those are really great, and it can be deconstructed too. So if they don't want to have it in taco form, they can have their black beans and their veggies and everything separate. That's completely fine as well. Last night we had an Asian stir fry, which my kids love. I tend to do those on Monday nights because I work really long days on Monday. So it's easy to come home and just throw the veggies in there and just cooked rice and mix it all together, and it's great. So really, pasta is just one food out of so many different foods. There's so many different whole grains, and so just play around with it. Just try different things.
I love that. Yeah. I would say too, think of the pasta, like what is the pasta made of? We see these pastas made of edamame. We see them we see zucchini noodles. We see, them made out of whole wheat and out of all the different grains. So just go back to the actual grain and see how that works. We see rice noodles. Yes, use rice instead. I love that answer. And then just a few more things. What was it that made you want to become a Food for Life instructor? Where did that come from within your journey and, your practice?
Well, I became a Food for Life instructor quite a long time ago. And I love the whole program. I love teaching, and I love teaching people how to cook very simply and very easily and to make delicious food. So I think the Food for Life program is perfect for that. I was hardcore in Food for Life for 4 years, teaching 2 to 3 classes a week for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fabulous program. But really that was it. And also what the Food for Life program is so good is that the curriculum is already set. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It comes with all of the evidence you can teach. So it's right out of the box. You just have to practice your teaching skills and your prepping skills for all of this stuff. It does take work to do the classes, but I think it's so worth it, and it really helps a lot of people.
I love seeing pediatricians and doctors and dietitians part of the program. I think it's so amazing and so helpful for the medical community to see medical professionals teaching this evidence-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine to the people. So thank you for all that you do. Dr. Yami, can you tell us where we can find you? Tell us all of the good things about you and how we can continue to learn from you.
Sure. Well, on social media, I'm most active on Instagram, and it's at the Dr. Yami, all spelled out. I have a couple of websites. One is dryami.com, and then the other one that probably most parents are going to find beneficial that are listening to this is veggiefitkids.com. And I have a resources page that has a lot of links, frequently asked questions. I also have links to videos that I have on YouTube that are really fun, recipe videos, but also one of the series I had done before was how a pediatrician orders at, and I go to different fast food restaurants and show you that you can make choices at many fast food restaurants that are mostly whole foods. So you can make this work for your lifestyle. I promise. You don't only have to cook at home all the time. And also newly on Clubhouse. I don't know if you're on Clubhouse yet, but it's been really fun. So on Clubhouse, I'm at the Dr. Yami as well. And then my book is called A Parent's Guide to Intuitive Eating, How to Raise Kids Who Love to Eat Healthy. And you can find that in all major online booksellers. If you want more information on it, you can go to dryami.com/book as well. That's about it. I'm a lot of different places.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So our closing question is kind of just goes with this podcast and what you and I are both trying to get out, which is good habits, great mindset, getting in touch with our intuition when it comes to living our most healthful lifestyle and plant-based nutrition. But to you, Dr. Yami, what does living a holistic life mean to you?
It means being in touch with your body, being in touch with your well-being, and knowing that the world is constantly changing around you. Your body is constantly changing. So you have to edit. So living a holistic lifestyle means being in tune and being prepared to make changes that help you feel the way that you want to feel.
I love it. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me and congratulations on your podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of The Urban Pharmacy. For today's show notes, head on over to theurbanpharmacy.com and be sure to join us inside our private Facebook group called The Urban Pharmacy, where we share inspiration, live trainings, and holistic living tips to help you build community and the healthy lifestyle that you've always wanted. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button and please consider leaving us a 5-star review. Before we connect again on the next show, follow me on Instagram at The Urban Pharmacy. That's urban with an H and pharmacy with an F. And I can't wait to hear your wellness journey as we get to know each other better. You know, there's truly no better time than now to level up your life, and I am so proud of you for showing up today. Until next time, be well, Health Crusader.